Oh, it's by group.
Okay. Hey, Ray, would you get me a Bible too? Oh, you're using that one, huh?
Yeah. Well, what do you want?
The timeline chart.
Bible? What do you need? The green one?
Anybody else need a Bible?
Green, Chinese one? No. Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff wants a Chinese one. Yeah,
KJ?
sure.
You can do it. Actually, no, actually, my favorite's NASB. And are you going to email the link out?
Okay. Can they stream it live?
Yeah.
Can you stream it live? So
It's live already. Google? I don't know. There's a few people waiting for the link.
oh, the people waiting for the link. Okay.
Sorry.
Well, while they're waiting for the link, let's do the dirty work here. Everybody take a couple of verses. We'll start with Elisa here in the front row. Let's read verses 1 through 35 of chapter 11. A couple of verses apiece.
All right, Daniel chapter 11. In the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to be an encouragement and a protection for him. And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia. Then a fourth will gain far more riches than all of them. And as soon as he becomes strong through his riches, he will arouse the whole empire against the realm of Greece.
And a mighty king will arise, and he will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. But as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom will be broken up and parceled out towards 4 points of the compass, though not to his own descendants, nor according to his authority which he wielded. For his sovereignty will be uprooted and given to others besides them.
Then the king of the south shall be strong, but one of his princes shall be stronger than he and shall rule, and his authority shall be a great authority. After some years they shall make allegiance, and the daughters of the kings of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the strength of her arm, and he and his arm shall not endure. But he shall be given up, and her attendants, he who fathered her, and he supported her in those times.
But from a branch of her roots one shall arise in his place, who shall come with an army, enter the fortress of the king of the north, to deal with them and prevail. And he shall also carry their gods captive to Egypt, with their princes and their precious articles of silver and gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. Also the king of the north shall come to the kingdom of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. However, his son shall stir up strife, and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overwhelm and pass through. Then he shall return to his fortress and stir up strife.
The king of the south will be enraged and go forth and fight with the king of the north. Then the latter will raise a great multitude, but that multitude will be given into the hand of the former. When the multitude is carried away, his heart will be lifted up. He will cause tens of thousands to fall. Yet he will not prevail, for the king of the north will again rise a greater multitude than the former. And after an interval of some years, he will press on with a great army and much equipment.
And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. The king of the north shall come up and cast up a mount and take the most fenced cities, and the arm of the south shall not withstand, neither the chosen people, neither shall there be any strength in with them. Anything to be feared.
But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and then shall stand before him. And he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be his. He shall also set his face to enter the strength of his people to them, and upright before him. Thus shall he, and he shall give him the daughter of Zion, trusting her, but she shall not stand on his side, neither in his word.
take many, but a ruler shall bring the reproach against them to an end, and if the reproach removed, he shall turn back on him. Then he shall turn his face toward the fortress of his own land, and he shall stumble and fall and not be found.
His successor will send out a tax collector to maintain the royal splendor. In a few years, however, he will be destroyed, yet not in anger or in battle.
In his place, a despicable person will rise, on whom the honor of kingship has not been conferred, but he will come in a time of tranquility and seize the kingdom by intrigue. The overflowing forces will be flooded away before him and shattered, and also the prince of the covenant.
After coming to an agreement with him, he will act deceitfully, and with only a few people he will rise to power. When the richest provinces feel secure, he will invade them and will achieve what neither his fathers nor his forefathers did. He will distribute plunder, loot, and wealth among his followers. He will plot the overthrow of fortresses, but only for a time.
He will rouse himself in all his strength and courage to lead a great army against the king of the south, who will fight back with a very large and powerful army, yet hampered by treachery. The king of the south will not persist. Those who eat at his board will be his undoing. His army will be swept away, and many will fall slain in the battle. The two kings bent on mischief. Those seated at the same table will lie to each other with advantage to neither, for an end is yet to be at the point of time.
Then he will return to his land with much plunder, but his heart will be set against the holy covenant, and he will take action and then return to his own land. At the appointed time he will return and come into the south, but this last time it will not turn out the way it did before.
For ships from Cyprus shall come against him, therefore he shall be doomed, and return and raid against the holy covenant, and do damage. So he shall return and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant. And forces shall be listed by him. They shall defile the sanctuary fortress. Then they shall take away the daily sacrifice, and place there the abomination of desolation.
With flattery, he will corrupt those who have violated the covenant. The people who know their God will firmly resist him. Those who are wise will instruct many, though for a time they will fall by the sword or be burned or captured or plundered. When they fall, they will receive a little help, and many who are not sincere will join them. Some of the wise will stumble, so that they may be refined, purified, and made spotless until the time of the end, for it will still come at the appointed time.
Okay, we'll stop there and just try to go that far tonight. Let's get a lot out of that. All right. So let's look at the overview here for a second. Now, Daniel received 4 visions in his lifetime regarding the end times. One was in Daniel chapter 7, that has to do with the 4 beasts and the little horn. Daniel chapter 8, that had to do with the ram and the goat and the little horn. Chapter 9, what happened there? Well, after he prays, there's a summary sort of given of what's going to happen to Israel, how they're going to be refined and their sin be removed and all that, and it's going to come through various persecutions and all kinds of things. And now chapters 10 through 12 is actually just one vision. We read all of 10 last week, but the vision wasn't in that. In chapter 11, the vision actually starts as this huge angel is telling him about the thing. So the 4 visions are similar in content in this sense that they always begin with a brief history of the actual literal history that went on, and then it shifts to events at the end of the age. So every one of those visions ends up with a little horn at the end of the age, or the Antichrist rising up at the end of the age, etc. Number 2, each of these visions emphasizes the coming of the Antichrist and his defeat by the Messiah. Number 3, as the 4 visions progress, they're all connected at several points in history and in eschatology. What does eschatology mean? Study of the end times, right? Okay. So there's a lot that every chapter. So 7's connected to 11, to the features of it, and so are 8 to 9, and et cetera, right? All 4 visions focus upon the purification of Israel. This is the burden of Daniel and the Lord. The purification of Israel, Jerusalem, and the temple of God, has to be, so the view of Daniel is this: God is going to purify Jerusalem and Israel so that the Messiah can come and reign there in Israel. That's what the deal is. That's how God is going to deal with it, through persecutions and discipline that will make them ready to receive their Messiah. Now, this in chapter 10, we looked last week. Daniel encountered this mighty being. We didn't really talk about it too much. We just mentioned it. The description of this mighty being is so glorious and so close to Revelation chapter 1, verses 10 through 19, when John looks up and sees the Lord Jesus in this glorious vision, that some people believe it's the angel of Jehovah. Now, you see, before Jesus came in the flesh, he didn't have a body. But he appeared at times in the Old Testament, and usually it's the angel of Jehovah. He appeared to Abraham and before the destruction of Sodom. He appeared at various times to various people. Angel of Jehovah. Was it this just another big angel like Gabriel or Michael, or was this in fact a theophany? You know, a theophany, which down the bottom here, it means an appearance of God before Christ was incarnate, came in the flesh. So whether it was an angel or this theophany of Christ pre-incarnate, he comes with strengthening love to Daniel. It's a great lesson for us. As God gives us visions, he also gives us tremendous spiritual support. So Paul always prayed. You remember Paul in Ephesians chapter 1, he prays that the saints would gain a spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of Christ. And then chapter 3, his prayer is now that the Holy Spirit would strengthen us in the inner man so that we can handle spiritual reality in that sense and live out of that spiritual reality. The 4 lessons on spiritual warfare that we saw from 10 are important because there is spiritual warfare going on today. Warfare takes place in time and space. It's a function of time and space. These angels were created. The earth was created. Time, space was created. We were created. And so there's a lot of spiritual activity that actually is being hammered out right now. Wrestling is going on, as was mentioned in the fact that it took 3 weeks for this being to break through to communicate to Daniel because of the spiritual conflict over Persia. Number 2, some battles seem to last a long time. This mighty one had to return after speaking to Daniel to continue this conflict over the contending over Persia and now the arising of Greece, which didn't happen for a couple of 100 years. No, that's too much, but 150 years. So there's a battle between Persia, the prince of Persia, and the prince of Greece, and eventually the prince of Greece rises up and becomes the next great empire. All of that behind the scenes of what we call politics, warfare, etc. 3, God's purposes advance through spiritual warfare. This same mighty one mentioned in chapter 11, verse 1, that he had previously helped God as Cyrus gained his victory over Babylon back now a century before. Not century, but 50 years before. Most importantly, number 4, somehow Daniel understood that his intercession was part of this battle in the heavenlies. It's kind of like that picture of Moses. You remember when they fought the Amalekites, and whenever Moses raised his hands, then the army of Israel prevailed. But when his hands got weak and it went down, then the other group prevailed. And so Aaron and Hur held up his arms so he could keep them up there, and Joshua could fight and win the victory. So the point is this: you see, our intercession affects the spiritual warfare. The more we pray, the more the good angels can do, as it were, and the Holy Spirit can do. And the less we pray, the more the enemy gets the upper hand. So there's a sense in which our not being serious about intercession hurts the purpose of God, or delays it, let's say, in that way. Okay? Tonight, this section that we just read is the most miraculous prophecy of human history in the whole Bible. And therefore, it's also the most controversial passage of prophecy in the whole Bible. You just read it. Did it seem controversial to you? No, because you say, who, where, he, and then him, and then her, and then what? And He advanced, but not to the fullness, and then he retreated, but then not to completely. And hey, what's going on? Okay. Scholars agree upon the main points of this final vision. I'm talking about godly Bible scholars, people who really believe. There's a lot of Bible scholars who don't believe in God or believe in a very liberal God, but talking about real Bible scholars. Here's what they agree upon regarding this vision. Number one, Daniel's last prophecy demonstrates that God of the heavens rules over history. That's what this vision is showing in part. They all agree about that. Number two, the specifics of this prophecy are to encourage the Jews as they go through their time of Jacob's trouble. As they go through all these things that they're going through, this vision from Daniel would help them centuries later. This prophecy begins with a prediction of immediate events in the near history of Daniel's lifetime. And this prophecy ends with the great tribulation and final conflict and victory of the Messiah as he comes to take his earthly kingdom. Now, we stop just short of that. Verse 36 and going on through chapter 12, it's still all one vision, shows the tribulation and the 3.5 years and all the stuff that goes on, and then the Messiah comes and gains the victory. Now, but all scholars agree about these basic things. But there's problems with this passage according to interpretation, and here they are. It has to do with where the Antichrist comes into the picture. So you notice in 11:6, it says, after some years. And so some Bible scholars says, now here is where the Antichrist shows up. Now, hang on a second. Let me get back to it here. So 11:6, listen. And in the end of the years, they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north in agreement. So anyway, some people believe it's there after some years. That's saying, okay, now we're going to the end times. Some say it's at verse 21. So they say, but it's here in verse 21 where we can definitely see the Antichrist coming to play, because it says, and in his estate shall stand up a vile, despicable person. They say, that's it. And some people go all the way to verse 36. Now, after verse 36, I don't think anybody has a problem with the fact that from verse 36 of the chapter on, the Antichrist comes into view. The question is, was he there before in the chapter? And so different scholars interpret a different place for when the Antichrist comes in. In other words, scholars are divided on when history stops and eschatology begins. When the present history is being unfolded here, history, and when the end times, in that gap of the seventh, this last seventh takes place. Something like that. Okay. And the key, of course, is who is being described. Antiochus Epiphanes or the Antichrist. Now, we've mentioned for a moment in the past about Antiochus Epiphanes. We'll learn more about him tonight. All right. Now, here we're seeing, tonight we're going to take the first view. We have to, the next week now, take a whole other approach as we look at this chapter. But first, I want you to see the tremendous specificity that Daniel is able to predict regarding the history of what happens in these days. This is a detailed history. All this his and her and all this kind of stuff is what happens in the Middle East in the time of the end. Now, there it is right there, spelled out. Easy chart to memorize. Remember, next week we may have a quiz, so I hope you have these down. All right. Oh, well, here's another one. There's another way of looking at it. You can see right away, and as you'll see, you saw that kingdom of the north and kingdom of the south. And most directly, that has to do with Egypt and Syria as so-called kingdom of Syria, which is much bigger than modern-day Syria. Syria went all the way out through Persia and all the way to India, as a matter of fact. So, in this passage we read, there's 4 sections. We're going to divide it up to try to make it simple. The rise and fall of the Persian Empire is the first section, a very short section. The rise of the Grecian Empire is the second section, not so long. C is the long section with all of the he did this and she did that, and the north and the south didn't prevail. Blah, blah. The wars and politics of the Grecian Empire between its two primary kingdoms, which are Egypt, Syria, is what's going to be rehearsed in that long passage there in amazing detail. And then finally, D, the rise and the abominations of Antiochus Epiphanes, which we see come in after verse 21 in this chapter. Okay, now, the rise and fall of the Persian Empire. It talks about verse 2, 3 more kings. Well, again, I keep folding this thing up. Here we go. So verse 2, behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings of Persia. Now, Darius was already a king of Persia, and Cyrus was a king of Persia before him. So now that he's saying after this present Darius, there will be 3 more kings in Persia. And then the 4th will be richer than they all. So there were 3 more Persian kings, Cambyses, Pseudo-Smerdis, and Darius. Really nice names, huh? And then along came the 4th guy, and he's the guy that most of you have heard about in history, if you read about the 300 and all that. This was Xerxes. Xerxes the First, from 486 to 465 BC. He was a very rich, he gained so much land and riches and everything. And he also thought he was a god. And this victory goes to people's heads, you know. So he figured he was a god. So he went and attacked, he tried to attack Greece, but he was defeated. And Xerxes turned around and went home. He was far richer than they all, and by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. And a mighty king shall stand up, and that shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. Now this is talking now about Greece. Now see, so verse 3 through 4a is now talking about Alexander the Great, who rose up, a mighty king shall stand up, he shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of the heavens, north, east, south, and west. And not to his posterity, his children did not claim the throne after he died, nor according to the dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those. Okay. So when Alexander, we saw this before. This is actually review. The Grecian Empire rose under Alexander the Great. He was unstoppable. And if you look closely at this picture, you see that he went all the way, in fact, into Pakistan and Afghanistan. In the far west, they're all in that yellow, and even in the red beyond it. Alexander the Great, tremendous conqueror. He died at how old? Something like that. 32, 34. He died. And when he died, the kingdom got divided into these 4 things. Now, as you can see, Ptolemy there in Egypt, and Seleucus there in what we will call Syria, but you see it involves an awful lot there, much more than just Syria, the country today. And then Cassander and Lysimachus. Now, Lysimachus basically held on to part of what we call Turkey today, and Cassander was the guy who held on to Greece. So in one sense, Cassander had the real prize. But what began to stir over the centuries was not Greece, but these 2 kingdoms here between Egypt, Ptolemy and Seleucus, as they battled back and forth. And these chapters, these verses are going to give us sort of a blow-by-blow account of the important events that happened within those 2 kingdoms. Okay? So I say the wars and the politics of the Grecian Empire between its 4 kingdoms. Actually, one of the kingdoms was quickly swallowed up. As you can see, there were actually 5. There was the kingdom of Antigonus, but Antigonus lost his kingdom real quick. The precise history of the conflicts between Ptolemy of Egypt and Seleucus of Syria are now what we're going to see. These battles ensued between 323 BC and 175 BC. Now, those are actual dates of history. 323 BC. Okay, now, anybody give me an idea, when was Daniel writing? Well, he was alive in 600 when he was taken into captivity. This would be, at the latest, let's say 510 BC. So this history after the Persian Empire is taking place in 323. He's already 200 years beyond his lifetime when he starts predicting these things that fully come to pass. And so these battles ensued. And of course, the point of it is, and the focus not to lose, is that that green strip in the middle there in part contains Israel. Israel was always trampled on as Egypt went north and as Syria went south. That's the way you go. There's no other strip of land. That's where the King's Highway was. And it always went up and down through this. It was always capturing and fighting going on in Israel as one was taking control and the other was going on. Okay. There are 20 people mentioned, mostly sometimes just as he, in this brief history that we read between the Kingdom of the South and Kingdom of the North. It's made tricky because most of the times we have to understand the antecedent to know what he's talking about. Now, who's the he here? Is this the Kingdom of the South, the Kingdom of the North? Sometimes it's a little tricky. It's also trickier because they like to have the same names. Now, I don't know why this is true, but also in England. Now, what are the names that the kings always had in England? Okay, the main ones were like James, Henry VIII. Think about that. They had a Henry the First, a Henry the Second, a Henry the Third, a Henry the Fourth, and Charles, James, Edward, and they had some guys who were I guess George. There was George the Third, at least. So they always like to go back to the same name. So this poor sucker, Charles's kid, when he becomes king, they're going to change his name. And make him King Edward, or they have to change his name to one of those royal kings' names. Well, that's what they did here, and that's why you get a lot of Seleucuses and a lot of Antiochuses and a lot of Ptolemies, and that's just the way it is. Okay. Now, because it's tricky like that, what I've done is I've given some of you a page. You have a piece of paper. Now, when you come to you in the history and you recognize your picture up here in the front, then you have to come up to the front and act out the history. That's all. Okay. So now look at your page. Look at your page and see who you got there. And when it comes to you, I want you please just to come forward. Come forward and we will see what happens. Now, this is actually just to sort of put names on all of these he's, and a couple of she's. Okay, here we go. Number 1, verse 5. First, we read verse 5. Jeremiah, read that.
And the king of the south will grow strong, along with one of his princes, who will gain ascendancy over him and obtain dominion. His domain will be a great dominion indeed. All right.
Ptolemy the First. Who's Ptolemy the First? Come on, who's got that picture? Huh? Who's got it? Grace, come on up here, Grace. Come on. Come on. Ptolemy the First of Egypt, that's king of the south, right? Then the king of the south, here she is. I mean, there he is, or whatever. That's it. I'll hold that paper in front of your face. That's right. Ptolemy First of Egypt aligned with Seleucus the First. Seleucus, good. There you go, Seleucus. Come on up, Seleucus. All right. Now, Seleucus actually wasn't one of the original kings. He became a king because he aligned up. Ptolemy was the older, Seleucus was the younger, and together they conquered Babylon in the north, which really solidified that Seleucid kingdom. Seleucid kingdom. It was that did it, right? Seleucus eventually became the stronger. So do this. There you go. Yeah. And he expanded his northern kingdom from Asia Minor to India and became rivals with Ptolemy the First. All right, verse 6. After some years, they will form an alliance, and the daughter, you're still up here. After some years, they will form an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to carry out a peaceful arrangement. All right. A generation passed away. You can both sit down. Now, Ptolemy II Philadelphus. Where is he? Ptolemy the second. He looks very Egyptian. Come on, who's that? Ah, Tian. Come on over here. Yes. You look like a mummy. I mean, a generation passed and Ptolemy the second, Philadelphus of Egypt, made an alliance by giving his daughter, Bernice. Bernice, where are you? Where's Bernice? Ah, Bernice. Let's see. No, that's not Bernice. That's a man. Here's Bernice. So Ptolemy II gave his daughter Berenice, such a beautiful girl, to Antiochus II. Antiochus II Theos. Now that's you. Oh no, wait, who is it? That's it. Julio, here we go. All right, there you go. There you go. Now you see, you read the verse there. After some years, they'll form an alliance. The daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north and carry out a peaceful arrangement. All right, let's see what happened. You're still here. But she shall not retain her position of power, that is Berenice, by marrying Antiochus II. Nor will he remain with his power, but she will be given up along with those who brought her in and the one who sired her, as well as he who supported her in the time. So when Ptolemy II, raise your hand. That's he died. He's gone. Antiochus divorced Bernice. Get out of here, Bernice. Right. And remarried his first wife, Laodicea. All right. Wait. Oh. That's not that. No, that's not it. Oh, yeah. See, now Antiochus had been married to Laodicea, remarried her, divorced Berenice, but you see what happened. Laodicea killed Berenice. You're gone, Julio. Oh, no. Who's who? And also killed Antiochus II. All right. That leaves you, huh? Laodicea, right? All right, hang right in there. Okay. Now that's what it said. Here's the next piece of history, right? Somebody read that in the Bible. That thing's so small, I can't even read it on the page here. What does that say?
For one of the descendants of her line will rise in his place, and he will come against their army and enter the fortress of the king of the north. And he will.
All right, let's stop right there. Ptolemy III of Egypt. Where is he? He's Bernice's brother. Come on up here. There you go. There you go. Now, Ptolemy III of Egypt, Bernice's brother, attacked the fortresses of the north under Seleucus II Callinicus, Laodicea's son. All right, where's that? Seleucus II. There you go. Finally. Luca finally gets in the picture. Okay, so now picture this now. Ptolemy from Egypt goes up and attacks the fortresses of the north, like up in Syria, and actually through Israel. There was some ancient cities there along in Israel. And attacked Laodicea's son, went back to Egypt with all of their gods, with their princes, with their treasures of gold. He actually attacked the fortresses there and came back with a lot of booty, including their gods, which is the most humiliating thing, to have your gods taken away by these people. So it says that he attacked the fortresses of the north, and he'll deal with them and will display great strength, and also their gods with their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold he will take back in captivity into Egypt. Now, this is in 225 BC that this actually happened. And so Ptolemy III went hulking back into Egypt with all of his treasures from the north. All right, let's see what happens now. Let's see. Cece, read that verse there up on top.
And he on his part will refrain from attacking the king of the north for some years.
Now so who's the he there? Ptolemy III. That's right. Okay, keep going.
Then the latter will enter the realm of the king of the south, but will return to his own land.
Now, who is the latter? See, the king of the north. You see, that's why I'm saying the antecedents, you got to keep. Okay. So then the king of the north tried to enter the realm of the king of the south, but he returns to his own land. So basically what happened was between these two guys, when victorious Ptolemy III of Egypt returned to Egypt to deal with a rebellion, he made no further invasions. Seleucus Callinicus, who avoided capture in the north, tried one attack on Egypt, but was thwarted and returned no more. That was in 225 BC. All right? All right, we're up to verse 10 already. The sons, Seleucus, will mobilize and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one of them will keep on coming and overflow and pass through, that he may again wage war upon his very fortress. Now, we have two new characters now. Two sons of Seleucus II. Now, which one's Seleucus II? I hear this guy, right? Right? Two sons of Seleucus II were Seleucus III. All right, so we need Seleucus III. All right, where is it? All right, here comes Seleucus III. Okay, you guys can go. You're down. You guys here's now Seleucus III and Antiochus the Great. Aha! Come up, Antiochus the Great. There we go. Now they got together, the two sons, you see, and they invaded southward into Asia Minor, into Israel, into Gaza. But Seleucus II died. Bye, Ray.
Bye-bye. Third.
Huh? Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Antiochus the Great continued to move toward Egypt. So one reason he's called the Great, you can imagine. He did great and mighty things. He was one of the two great Antiochuses. Okay? All right. Let's see what happens next. 11 and 12. Who can read that? Jen, can you read that from your place?
Yeah. The king of the south will be enraged and go forth and fight with the king of the north. Then the latter will raise a great multitude, and that multitude will be given into the hand of the former. When the multitude is carried away, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cause tens of thousands to fall, yet he will not prevail.
Okay. In 217 BC, now we're getting down to the centuries. King Ptolemy IV of Egypt. Where is he? Yes. He was enraged because Antiochus III tried to attack. He raised an army of 70,000. He routed the army of the north as Antiochus fled for his life. So he started going up into the north. Antiochus fled for his life. And then Ptolemy IV, full of pride and emboldened by his victory, returned to Egypt without capturing Antiochus the Great. Could be problems. All right. Verse 13. Danielle, would you read?
For the king of the north will again raise a greater multitude than the former, and after an interval of some years, he will press on with a great army and much equipment.
Okay. Now, by 201 BC, Antiochus the Great conquests built a great army. So basically, Antiochus the Great went east and captured India and everything. He came back with so much money and wealth and with new implements of war from India. I don't know what those implements were. And he immediately began attacking Egypt in the south, now under Ptolemy V, Epiphanes, son of Ptolemy IV. Now, where is Ptolemy V?
No, you're the star. No, you're the father. That's your son.
Now, where's he? Where are you, son? This guy. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, you can go.
You must carry on my line.
All right, verse 14. Frankie.
Now in those times many will rise up against the king of the south. The violent ones among the people will also lift themselves up in order to fulfill the
they will fall down.
Now, this happened the same year, 201 BC. When Ptolemy V came to the throne, he was a child. His father died. He became the king, Pharaoh, whatever you want to call it. And when he became king, Antiochus says, now's my chance. And he started heading down to attack Egypt for once and for all, and gathered a whole bunch of disgruntled, even Israelis, where it says there, many will rise up against the king of the south. That means not just the Seleucus people, but other nations as well, with allies from various countries, including violent Jews from Israel, the violent ones among your people. So there were many Jews who were violently against the oppression they had faced under Egypt. You got to understand, who's ever in the ascendancy is ruling over Israel. They're making slaves of Israel. So when the Egyptians do it, they do their slavery. And then when the Seleucids have their day, they do their slavery. And that's, so they said, let's get on the gravy train with Antiochus the Great. Let's go back down into Egypt. Let's join them in battle. And they went down there in battle. And they thought these violent Jews, in other words, fighting Jews, thought that they would gain favor. But instead, they ended up being oppressed by Antiochus the Great. And that's the story up above them, right? Your people also will lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they will fall down. So that's talking about those violent Jews hoping for the best. Okay, 15 and 16. Can anybody read that? It's pretty small.
Then the king of the north will come, cast up a siege ram, and capture a well-fortified city. And the forces of the south will not stand their ground, not even their choicest troops, for there will be no strength to make a stand. But he who comes against him will do as he pleases, and no one will be able to withstand him. He will also stay for a time in a beautiful land with destruction on his head.
All right, so Antiochus III, where is he? Still. He's still reigning through this whole thing. So he was a dominant character in this history. He attacked Egypt's army and laid siege in Sidon. Now, where's Sidon? You know where Sidon is? That was probably the major defeat that broke the back of Egypt. Where was it? Where's Sidon? In today's Sidon, Lebanon. Tyre and Sidon are two cities in Lebanon even today. Right? Okay, so but Sidon was a major city, and Sidon was defeated, and that's up on that north-south route there, going right through Israel and everything. So Antiochus came down there, defeated the armies of Egypt there, and came to Sidon and defeated General Scopus. Antiochus the Great occupied Israel when he came back. He stayed in the beautiful land. He stayed and made his home there in Israel and began to rule very harshly as he pleased. So this turned out very badly, even for the Jews that signed up to be in his army. This was in 198 BC. All right. Next one. Jeremy, go ahead, read that one.
He will set his face to come with the power of his whole kingdom, bringing with him a proposal of peace, which he will put into effect. He will also give the daughter of a woman to ruin it, but she will not take a stand for him or be on his side.
Okay, now something happened at this period of time, 197 BC, namely, Egypt began to ally with Rome. And Rome was a burgeoning, new, young force to deal with. So when Egypt in the south aligned with Rome and planned a counterattack, Antiochus the Great sued for peace by giving his daughter Cleopatra. All right, now who's Cleopatra? Oh, come on, here we go. Now, Cleopatra married the 7-year-old Ptolemy V. Wonderful. But believe it or not, Cleopatra sided with her little 7-year-old husband rather than with Antiochus, who'd made the deal. See? But she will not take a stand for him or be on his side. That infuriated Antiochus. Imagine he gives his daughter away to make an alliance so he can get more booty out of Egypt. And what happens is she says, no, I like Pharaoh. Give me Pharaoh. 197 BC, this took place. And they caused a lot of resentment. All right, Caleb, can you read?
Sure. Then he will turn his face to the coastlands and capture many. But the commander will put a stop to his scorn against him. Moreover, he will repay him for his scorn. So he will turn his face toward the fortress of his own land, but he will stumble and fall and be found no more.
This is a very interesting part in history, 191 BC. With that treaty that they made between Egypt and Syria, Antiochus began expanding his kingdom westward, trying to attack Greece. But he was defeated at Thermopylae and again outside Ephesus, now all the way over in Turkey and over in the Grecian borders. So now, Antiochus is really going after that. And again outside Ephesus in 189 BC by Scipio, a Roman general. Now the Romans are getting in the thing. Antiochus returned north and died trying to plunder the temple of Bel in Babylon. He went back north, and even though he actually ruled over Babylon, he actually went to the temple, but there he was killed. He stumbled and fell, and he found, where does it say?
Found no more.
Yeah. Anyway, so and that's what happened. That was the end of Antiochus the Great. Bye-bye, Antiochus the Great. And who was Scipio, by the way? Come on up, Scipio. Or Scipio, as we'll call you. So now you got the tough Romans in there, and Ptolemy, and little Cleopatra. This isn't the famous Cleopatra who married Mark Antony. There's Cleopatra the first, Cleopatra the second, Cleopatra the third, Cleopatra the fourth, Cleopatra. Oh. Verse 20. Sammy?
Then in his place one will arise who will send an oppressor through the jewel of his kingdom. Yet within a few days he will be shattered, though not in anger nor in battle.
175 BC, Seleucus IV. All right? Where's Seleucus IV? You guys can all sit down now. You guys are done. Where's Seleucus? Here we come. Come on over, Seleucus. There you go. You got one of the shorter stories going. Seleucus IV, Philopator. Anybody have any idea what Philopator means? All these names mean something. What?
Love of knowledge.
Love of my father. Yeah. He loved who? Antiochus the Great. All right, now, so this is the son of Antiochus the Great, imposed oppressive taxes on his kingdom because Rome imposed 1,000 talents of gold. Among other things, he went into Jerusalem and stole the treasures out of the temple to pay this tax to Rome. And he was mysteriously removed after only a few years. Do you know how? Well, they think he was poisoned by the next guy who comes to the realm. Okay, you can sit down. Where is he? Oh, boy. Please. Now we've gone to the next section, in section D, starting verse 21. It's the history of Antiochus Epiphanes, the most wicked, evil ruler of the Seleucid Empire that ever has been. And you can see, because even in the sculptor, he had no eyeballs. Okay. Antiochus IV Epiphanes, king of the Seleucids in the north, becomes the focus of this prophecy as a most evil and powerful emperor. If there was ever a human being in ancient history who describes what the Antichrist will be like in his actions, this is the man we want to watch. Okay? Julio, can you read that?
In this place,
Despicable person.
on whom the honor of kingship has not been conferred, but he will come in a time of tranquility and seize the kingdom by intrigue.
So Antiochus Epiphanes was not in the line of the royalty. He stole it after this guy, the previous one was poisoned. Through all kinds of intrigue. This guy is a cloak and dagger intrigue. You know, the prime minister gets knifed, and it's just the whole thing. It's like a Chinese mystery. You never know who's doing it. What's it? Well, we all know that the most intriguing, mysterious people are the Chinese emperors and their family. Antiochus Epiphanes usurped the Seleucid throne and is prophetically the little horn of Daniel chapter 8. Let's just read part of the little horn in Daniel 8, 9 through 14, just so we get a little taste of the previous description of him. You want to know what he's kind of like. Who's got it? All right, Jeremiah.
Out of one of them came forth a rather small horn which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. It grew up to the host of heaven and caused some of the hosts and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and it trampled them down. It even magnified itself to be equal to the commander of the host, and removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. And on account of transgression, the host was given over to the horn along with the regular sacrifice, and it will fling true to the ground and perform its will and prosper. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that particular one who was speaking, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice?
All right, never mind. Then we just have details. This is talking about the little horn, Antiochus Epiphanes. Epiphanes means a visible God. Antiochus realized somewhere in his short reign that he was actually Jupiter. He believed he was Jupiter, the god. And so he could do everything by divine right. What's a divine right monarchy? This is a divine right monarchy is what happened even in Europe when the kings believed they were placed there by God and they were impervious to anything. Whatever they said was the voice of God. So they killed whoever they wanted and they didn't murder because they were God. Antiochus Epiphanes thought he was Jupiter and he started acting like it. Of course, he immediately erased Seleucus IV by poisoning him, and there we go. Now he's on the throne. 175. The overflowing forces will be flooded away before him and shattered, and also the prince of the covenant. After an alliance is made with him, he will practice deception. He'll go up and gain power with a small force of people. He was this general like Napoleon. He knew what to do. Large forces, small forces. His army moved like an overwhelming flood through the nations surrounding Israel. It beat Egypt between the Nile and Gaza. You're right there in Israel. And in his desire to make Israel Hellenistic. Now, what does that mean? What is it? Yeah. Greek culture, worshiping Greek gods, speaking Greek. This is what he felt like was, because he was Jupiter, this is what he's going to do, set these Jews free by making them Greek, you see. In his desire to make Israel Hellenistic, he removed Jerusalem's high priest. Now that's where it says there. And he will also shatter the prince of the covenant. Now this is talking about the high priest Onias, prince of the covenant, the high priest of Jerusalem, and sold the high priesthood to Jason, who was a Benjaminite. What's wrong with a Benjaminite being high priest? Not the tribe of Levi. But this guy was clever. Intrigue, all kinds of things. Look, let's see some of this. Woo, look how small that print is. Can you do it? Elisa, can you read it?
In a time of tranquility, he will enter the richest parts of the realm, and he will accomplish what his fathers never did, nor his ancestors. He will distribute plunder, booty, and possessions among them, and he will devise his schemes against strongholds, but only for a time. He will stir up his strength and courage against the king of the south with a large army, so the king of the south will mobilize an extremely large and mighty army for war, but he will not stand. The schemes will be devised against him. Those who eat his choice food will destroy him, and his army will overflow, but many will fall down and slain.
Okay. Antiochus plundered his conquered countries as he went. He gained more riches and power than anyone preceding him of these Greek guys. In his war, he did surprise attacks. Now, back in the old days, nobody did surprise attacks. As a matter of fact, they told you, next spring, we're coming out to fight you. That's right. And so the two armies met out in the field, and just like in the Revolutionary War, you know, the British just came, stood out there, and the colonials came out there and stood there. They shot each other, or in this case, probably, you know, went at each other with lances and spears and all this kind of stuff. And that's the way he did war. Not Antiochus Epiphanes. He snuck around, ambushed people, defeated armies with a small group. He just was unstoppable. He went down south, attacked Egypt, and Egypt couldn't stand against him. You know why? Where is King Ptolemy VI? Well, Ptolemy the Sixth didn't have a chance. You know why? Because he had bribed the ministers in his government. You know, when it came time for attack, everything went wrong. All the commands were wrong, the whole thing. Ptolemy VI was in a lot of trouble. This is in 168 BC. Your time's not quite over yet. Come back, Ptolemy. Come back. You haven't invented trigonometry yet. Just stay there a minute. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Namansa, can you read those 2 verses?
As both kings, their hearts will be intent on evil, and they will speak lies to each other at the same table.
Now, Ptolemy IV was a good liar too. And so Antiochus Epiphanes and these guys, they would make peace treaties. They would say, we're going to do this. We'll get together, do this. They never did it. Always broke it, always lied, always, you know, it's just like Putin and Obama. They're just talking to each other. They're both lying at each other, you know, no truth going on. So they have evil intent, but they'll speak lies to each other at the same table. It will not succeed. Oh, sorry, Namatz again.
But it will not succeed, for the end is still to come at the appointed time. Then he will return to his land with much plunder, but his heart will be set against the Holy Covenant, and he will take action and then return to his own land. So
now here he is, and here's Antiochus Epiphanes. He gets down to Egypt, and they start making all kinds of peace treaties and everything like that. And so he starts going home with all of this plunder. Something in his heart is angry about Israel. And he goes there. He plunders the treasures of the temple of Jerusalem. He oppresses Israel with a fury prophesied concerning his end. He just hated the Jews, especially unless they Hellenized. But you know what? Jews were as stubborn back then as they are today at the deli. They say, "What do you want?" You say, "Next." You go into Katz, you better be ready with your order like that. You say, "I'm thinking next." Well, that's what they were doing to each other. And Antiochus Epiphanes, it drove him crazy. So, Loka.
At the appointed time, he will return and come into the south. But this last time, it will not turn out the way it did before.
This is the end of him. All right.
For ships of Kittim,
Yeah, those are Roman ships. Go ahead.
Will come against him. Therefore, he will be disheartened and will return and become enraged at the holy covenant and take action. So he will come back and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant. Forces from him will arise, desecrate the sanctuary fortress, and do away with the regular sacrifice, and they will set up the abomination of desolation.
Now, this is something we could read. I have the book of Maccabee, but somebody's asleep in that room, so I won't go get it. But now we're getting into Jewish history at a very important junction in the Jewish history. Antiochus Epiphanes went down to attack Egypt, but the Roman ships stopped him. And Gaius Popilius was actually a senator, I believe, in Rome. He humiliated Antiochus Epiphanes. He says, "Don't you even try it. We'll do all kinds of things." And it humiliated, it infuriated him, but he turned tail and he left. This whole thing took place right at the at the Nile. Down, you come down there, right down at the Nile. So coming back down he comes through Israel, and he is mad. He goes in there, he vents his anger. He pollutes the temple by slaughtering a pig on the altar and sprinkling his blood throughout the temple. He forbade sacrifices to God. You couldn't sacrifice to God. You could sacrifice to Zeus or Jupiter or Artemis or any of those, but you could not sacrifice to God. And they killed people who tried to sacrifice to the Lord God. Thousands and thousands of people were killed at this time. And he set a statue of Zeus in the holy place, which is called that abomination of desolation. So there's a little picture. Wait a minute, where's Popilius? Where's our guy? Gaius Popilius. Yeah, there he is. A Roman to be sure. Okay, well, Gaius Popilius. In one sense, Gaius Popilius stopped Antiochus Epiphanes' attack. On the other hand, he enraged Antiochus Epiphanes. That's the statue of Zeus in the temple. So you can imagine that being in the temple of God. I mean, God-fearing Jews were furious about this. You could do anything to them. Don't do that. Right? So it all came down to a great boil. By smooth words, he'll turn to godlessness, those who act wickedly toward the covenant. But the people who knew their God will display strength and take action. Those who have insight among the people will give understanding to the many, yet they will fall by the sword and by flame, by captivity, and by plunder for many days. Antiochus insisted the Jews be Hellenized, worship Greek gods. He destroyed Torahs. He burned up every Torah he could find. He sent his troops to kill all who disobeyed his divine edict. Many compromised, many suffered and died. And while Antiochus was away, battling up north of Israel, Judas Maccabeus. Now, we just mentioned Judas Maccabeus, but he was the leader of the rebellion of the Jews that recaptured the temple and purified and all that. And what does Judas means? Judah, from the tribe of Judah. And Maccabeus means? Did you read? See, you see it on the thing there. It's Judas, and then it's actually Maccabeus. Right. Judas the Hammer. That's what they call him. And his brothers, they called the Maccabeus brothers. So there's two books in the Apocrypha, between the Old Testament and the New Testament, about this history of the Maccabees. And it's true history. Amazing story that these guys came in there and they defeated the Syrian army. They took over the temple. They set guards all about the temple. They purified the temple. And the way you purify the temple is candles. So they lit up candles, and this became the Feast of Hanukkah, right? Okay, Jan, read that section right there.
Now when they fall, they will be granted a little help, and many will join with them in hypocrisy.
Okay, now this is talking about Israel now. Now when they fall, they will be granted a little help, and many will join with them in hypocrisy. So now a number of Jews Hellenized and sacrificed to Jupiter, to Zeus. Okay, they'll join them in hypocrisy. Okay.
Some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge, and make them pure until the end time, because it is still to come at the appointed time.
So you see, through this, let's try to remember this. The whole purpose is to purify the hearts of the Jews who have been so far from God, who have not acknowledged the Messiah, who just, all this kind of stuff. So the righteous revival was celebrated by Hanukkah in 164 BC as the lamps were lit in the temple. Antiochus died that same year in a battle elsewhere. And bye-bye. And after 20 years of skirmishes, these stubborn, problematic Jews were basically left alone by not only the Greeks, but then when the Romans took over, here's what the Romans said in Rome: leave the Jews alone. They're such a problem. And so, of course, they invoked great taxes on them and things like that. But basically, they said, let the Sanhedrin do what they want. Let them kill who they want. Let them do justice the way they want. Let them have their own temple sacrifices and taxes. And don't mess with them anymore. After 20 years of conflict with the Syrian army, the whole Seleucid Empire said, forget these dudes. Just let them do what they want. There's a great victory. And this, of course, gives a great sense of hope to Jews going through tough times even today. Okay? All right, there we are. Thank you very much. You guys did a great job. Judas the Hammer, a whole bunch. All right, so this is just the last little summary, and then that's it. This passage predicted the events of 3 succeeding centuries with such accuracy that liberal scholars cannot accept the book of Daniel being written in the captivity. Either this book is true or it's a total hoax. These are so accurate that liberal scholars admit this is what it's talking about. They don't have any problem with the fact that these, and then he did this and went to the king of this. They have no problem that this is the history of the Grecian empires of Seleucid and Ptolemy. No problem with it. Their problem was, how could Daniel know that? in 500 BC. He can't. Therefore, the book must have been written much later. How much later? They go, well, all the way back. They got to go back to 146 BC. I mean, because that's when Judas Maccabeus, took the temple back and purified it. 146 BC. Daniel had already been mentioned by scholars back in the 3rd and 4th century. In Ezekiel, Daniel's mentioned as a prophet. So now they got to say, well, now Ezekiel must be wrong because it mentions Daniel. But so anyway, the point is that for the believer, this affirms in an amazing way that God not only rules, but he shapes the history of the world to accomplish his purpose for his people, in this case, the Jews that he's trying to purify. To the Jewish diaspora, the dispersed Jewish nation, Daniel has given comfort during their centuries of trouble, persecution, and captivity. Daniel stands out for them as a story of promise that God's still in control. To observers of this history, principles can be learned of how kingdoms rise and fall. To Bible students, the background for the end-time appearance of the Antichrist can be understood. This is the value of this section as we have just looked at it. But next week, we're going to do Daniel 11 remix. And we're going to take the view of some scholars that say early on in this history, they all agree that recent history, it begins with recent history. But there are some scholars who believe all of these verses that we heard are about things that are yet to happen. That in some way in the end days, two huge kingdoms in the north and in the south are going to come and fight each other, and Israel's going to be the territory in between. As Ezekiel mentions, Gog and Magog, many people think Russia, tribes of the north, certain up in the northern areas here. And the south involves more than just Egypt. But something has to happen for all this to happen. I would say the main thing is this. What continent in the world right now, what continent in the world is the richest in natural resources? Africa. South America is still basically untapped. But Africa, if somebody can ever get out of Africa their richness in such a way that the people prosper, all of Africa, let's just take a silly example. South Africa could be a tremendous power in the world. And in the end, they could hold the monetary coin like China holds it now. Now, all I'm saying is we don't know, but if something has to happen in the future for the South and the North, for this to be picturing what's going to happen in the end times. But we're going to try to look at some of that. You think about that for next time. We'll revisit these things, not with specific dates and Antiochus the first, the second, the third, the fourth, and Ptolemy the first, second, but the possibilities of what could happen at the end times. And in doing this, please, if you want to reference Revelation chapter like 6 and 7 and 8 that have to do with the trumpets and these beasts that come out of various places in the south and the north and all, let's see if we can compose something, a possibility regarding the apocalyptic meaning of these verses. But we'll talk about that a little next week, okay? Isn't that amazing, the history there? And isn't it amazing that God showed Daniel that 200 years before it even started happening? Event after event after event after event. Now, if that says nothing else to us, here's what it says. God knew the past then. And the book of Revelation and the book of 1 Thessalonians and Matthew chapter 24 and all these passages where Jesus talks about his return and things. If God could predict this history with such accuracy in the past, then the history of the future, which is being predicted in these books on the end, are also going to come to pass with more specificity than we realize. Father, we thank you. We just marvel at your word, how it came to pass in history in such a way that even liberal scholars, Jewish scholars, unbelieving scholars don't know what to do with Daniel. We know what to do with Daniel. We press it close to our heart. And we thank you that it reveals a God who is working through all the vicissitudes of history and the rise and fall of kingdoms. Oh Lord, we want to be wise in these last days and know how to live in such a way that we can understand the signs of the times. In Jesus' name we pray.